Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Origins podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin. Today, we have the one and only Jay Acunzo, who's the podcast host of Unthinkable, which has been around for a lot. I think he's got several hundred episodes. He's written two books called The Creator Compass and Break the Wheel. And he's also the founder of the Creator Kitchen, which is really aimed at working with creators to helping them tell their story. So he has a really interesting breakdown about how reach creates, or resonance equals reach, and how you can create stories, micro stories to create impact. He's got a very compelling, very unique point of view. And without further ado, let's paddle in. Well, let's just jump right in. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you
Good
for
to have
having
you
me.
on here.
Yeah, it's fun to be here.
So I've been trying to get you on the show for a long time. And what's an example of that is I went to go look at all the directory of like where to find the show notes, and I'm like, you're way down. So we must have talked a year ago, almost, talking about being on the show. So
Probably, yeah.
yeah, I've been following you on social media, and I gotta say straight up, you're one of the very few people that shares a lot of the same point of view on a lot of topics. So I'm hoping to kind of mind meld with you a little bit to see a little bit more about your point of view on the world. But before we go into that, I thought it'd just be great for everybody to get to know you. So if you don't mind giving a little bit of background, you got a podcast, you got a couple books, you've got the Creator Kitchen, you've been in this industry for a long time. Can you give me just a real rapid rundown just to get people caught up with you?
Yeah, the best way to understand me is to understand what I stand for. It's a lot of words that sound like stand in that sentence. I want to help people make things that matter. There's a lot of commodity content and copycat thinking, and there's a lot. I like to joke with people that it's never been easier to create mediocrity at scale. That's kind of the backdrop that we need to stand up in front of. But the good news is it produces a lot of gray, and if you know how to shine bright in your own color, it's an advantage actually. So to everyone producing commodity content, thank you. Abusing AI tools, thank you. You're making our job a lot easier. But I've done that in different capacities. So today I run a mastermind called the Creator Kitchen, which is a membership that helps business experts and coaches and consultants and marketers, basically people who are experts, turn into influential storytellers and voices. And I started that with Melanie Diesel, who's another marketing author and speaker. And a lot of my work has centered around creating shows for brands like Drift and Wistia and Help Scout, and consulting companies like Salesforce and GoDaddy. And before that, I was in-house working at a VC firm and a tech startup. I was the head of content at HubSpot briefly and worked in a sales job at Google. So I kind of moved around the tech scene. But the through line throughout all of it was this necessary focus on trying to learn how to resonate with people. And if my listeners to my show or my readers to my newsletter were asked what one word describes Jay's work, it would be that. It would be the idea of resonance in a world so obsessed with reach, and trying to help people understand that the ability to resonate is itself a craft. It's a skill. And we ought to be focused on that because that's where our results come from. And I think we're just losing the script too much, trying to produce more commodity content in the name of reach. And it's not effective. And it also is just not rewarding.
I love that word resonance, and think that intro, it's like resonance is like frequency. It's like when you're on the same wavelength and frequency,
Yes.
it's unseen and there's something powerful about it. It's like when music resonates with you, it's deep in your DNA and your soul. And I think that's what you're, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of what you're referring to when I see your tweets about
Yeah.
it. I look at it looks like what kind of dog do you have, by the way?
I have a beagle mix. He's like sitting outside. I
Oh
can't
yeah.
describe that as barking. That I can only describe that as dog screaming,
I've got
which
a
is
little,
super useful when I have a podcast called Unthinkable, and
yeah.
recording it, you hear me end to end tell a beautiful story, but what you don't hear is me going, "Hi, my name is Jay," and then he screams.
Right. I've had a couple. I did one with what's his name? He's a comedian, and I had him on my show. My dog was going crazy. I said, we'll go. Oh, probably like that. And I go, probably won't. I left it in there, and people have commented more about my dog staying in there than almost anything else. I've got a dog as well, little Bichon or a Brussels Griffins. But back to resonance. That's kind
Yeah.
of part of resonance, right? Which is here we are. I'm going to leave that in. That's part of the natural human communication that I think people are craving in terms of craft. I mean, no, this is not it's imperfect for a podcast, but there's something human and real about it. And I'm curious what makes resonance for you. How do you communicate, or how do
Yeah.
you feel that is that?
I don't think it's about showing the seams and having errors. I think that's just one one approach. And,
Okay.
my show, I would definitely edit that out, because it's the nature of my show, right? It's not the nature of your show. There's no right or wrong here. It's just that like it wouldn't fit the style of show. So, and this word authenticity gets thrown around a lot. Like we're saying things in marketing. I'm pretty sure we've lost sight of what it means. Like, what does it mean to be authentic? What does it mean to be human? Like the worst actors in the world. I mean, like bad actors, not, you know, Hollywood actors, but
Hmm.
that is human, right? To be a jerk to somebody is human. It's not what we're going for. If I'm authentically feeling very tired or cynical today, you don't want me showing up like that. I certainly don't want somebody who's like fixing my car, operating on my dad's heart or something, to be authentically how they feel at all times. So I don't know where the focus has drifted towards those words, like why. But I do think that like to define resonance might be important here. So if we think of its close cousin reach, that's how many see it. Resonance is how much they care. And so to your point, if you think of the sciences, in the sciences, resonance is an energy transfer. When one frequency is matched by another frequency, it's amplified. And so a very simple example is me pushing my daughter on a swing. If I can match her cadence and at the right moment add something to it, she is amplified. She moves faster. If I am a little bit out of sync with her, I am not creating what's known as a resonant frequency. So it's literally in the sciences an energy transfer. It's in the emotional arts and the emotional work that we do. It's the imparting of the energy needed to act. So I define resonance as the urge to act that someone feels when a message or a moment spent with you aligns so closely to your own lived experience or beliefs that they feel amplified. Their thoughts, their emotions, even their abilities feel amped up. And so they have this energy necessary to take an action, which is what we want, right? So we're all in the business of sparking action, which means we're all in the business of learning how to resonate. And you can do that in myriad ways. A lot of my work looks like some kind of performance on a stage, in a narrative podcast, even in a LinkedIn video, which is just a talking head. I'm crafting a story sort of in real time, constructing it. You're really not getting a lot of the seams, like the stitching or the behind the scenes from me. But I don't think that makes the work anything less resonant. I think what people are craving is the feeling always of feeling seen, right? That's
Hmm.
the ultimate sign you're resonating, is if someone says as a result of spending time with you or a message of yours, oh my gosh, I feel seen, right? They throw up their hands like, yes, this. And so that's the question on my mind a lot for marketers, is like, if in what you're creating, can you get a small people reacting in big ways? Because if not, you're not resonating. And the reaction when that isn't happening, most marketers do something nonsensical. It's like, well, I'm not really seeing the results from this content that I wish I saw. And so I better put it in front of way more people. Like that's the response. And that never made sense. You can reach some people now. Those some people like you now. They are signaling to you the work isn't working for them. Why do you think then that the people you've already earned the trust of are saying, not it, not great? Why is the response that I better put it in front of more people? It never made sense to me. So typically we think we have problems relating to reach. If I could just reach more people, I actually think that the problem is relating to resonance. You're not ensuring they care. If you know how to make people care, the reach either becomes easier to build, or you never need to think about it because the people who care deeply about you share your work for free.
Love that. What a great description. And thank you for that. Like the seam, I've always thought that, a little bit of the seams and showing a little bit of the rough edges is sort of a little bit of a counterbalance to what I believe is coming, which is this perfection. There's going to be an overload of perfection content with AI. Seemingly, we're going to almost like look for a little bit of impression to know that it's human. That's maybe where I kind of go there, but not
Yeah,
necessarily.
I'd
But it's,
shift
I like
that.
your expression. Yeah.
I'd shift that a little bit. I use a different P word, perspective, right?
Okay.
Like what is something you can bring and only you can bring is perspective. So if I prompted a tool to say, teach me how, like write an article encouraging people to try new things. It might open like in some very generic fashion. Like studies show that human beings are not really afraid of the task in front of them. They're afraid of the unknown. And that's why we don't try new things. All right, it's pretty generic to start our article. But I could start much differently. I could start by saying something like, for years, Scott, I was afraid of making espresso. I have a beautiful machine in my kitchen. It's embarrassing because I'm Italian, but my wife makes it every day. She's not Italian. And I would ask her constantly to make it, or I would agonize over the research and try to figure out the best way to use this machine, right? But today I make espresso every day. Why do I do that? because one time I decided to make it. So literally I tried it once and now I do it every day. And when I tried it that one time, I realized, oh, I've wasted a lot of time trying to agonize over this thing, trying to perfect it, trying to do the research, following the espresso influencers, asking my wife, like outsourcing it to her or not doing it. Wasted time, wasted energy, because it turns out I wasn't scared of doing the thing. I was just scared of the fact that it was a new thing. And the science shares this. The science suggests that most of the time we're not really afraid of the thing. We're afraid of the unknown. And if that's the case, we should move quicker to make the unknown known. So whatever you're staring down, whatever feels new and scary to you, stop doing all this agonizing and just try the thing once. Because even if you don't then figure it out, which you might, at least your research becomes more productive. Okay, so same prompt, right? But what you saw was AI in some generic fashion doing it one way. It's very polished. It would be delivered in nice language. JI, if you will, like I did it an entirely different way. It can also be perfect language, no errors, well constructed. It could be quote unquote perfect. It doesn't have to be messy, bad, or error ridden to prove that it came from me. What needs to be there, though, is my unique perspective. So the summary of this is, think of it this way. AI and human beings both run on LLMs. AI has large language models. Human beings have little life moments. And the problem is that while AI can't help but use and rely on its LLM, most of us don't use ours. We're not observing the world and the tiny things that happen to us and imbuing that stuff with meaning and then using it as storytelling. But that's our unique advantage, right? So use that. And if your way is to be off the cuff and messy and have some errors leak into the work, great. If your way is to polish it and clean it up and have some pristine narrative or highly produced visual or video, great. It's not really the production value that will determine is this human or is this not. What is human is it's drawing from your human LLM, your little lived moments.
Which is really, and I like that. I remember I was reading your posts on that, and that's the way you're describing that. I feel a little more detail on that for someone that's listening. My understanding is it's really more expressing your experiences, your perspective, your unique unique point of view that kind of ties in something of that's unique to your experience, human experience. Is that right, or is there a more better way of describing it?
Can you restate the question to me in a different way?
Yeah, so the question of like little what you call LLMs, little
Your
life
little life moments.
moments, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really unique to me, Scott Martin, my experience of the world, my
Yes.
perspective of the world.
Right.
So it's that's really what you're talking about, is infusing that into the content, into the resonance, if you will,
There's
of what you're trying to
all
communicate.
these things we've been saying for years and years and years that like people go, yeah, I know it's important. And then they like sort of tuck it under the rug. Now these things are urgent. People say for years and years, if I white labeled it, took out the brand, took out the name, how do I know it's you?
Hmm.
People talk about, yeah, you need a point of view. You need a perspective. You need an angle into this topic that everyone else is also talking about. You need a hook. Like there's these things that are in the zeitgeist and have been for quite a while. It's just that we've downplayed them. Like I've been in my corner beating the drum for these things for years and years. Now it's like my audience is growing and growing and growing lately because I think people go, oh, wow, this stuff isn't just important for those who are sort of bleeding heart creative. It's also important for every function in business, for everybody who's a communicator in any way to figure this stuff out. So what I've always seen as mission critical, people now understand as urgent.
So if I'm looking at the perspective of a lot of people in my audience that are an agency, they're delivering services to their client. Can they deliver these little life moments, or does that really have to be done directly from the client? Like how do you like a lot of outsourcing,
Yep.
they're when they're working on it, one of the challenges I see that happens is they kind of go to the center. They try to go to what can be repeatable, what can be easily communicated in terms of simple language, but they can't really talk about, because they're the agency. They're sort of like a little step removed on their experience with using it, unless they're an actual client. How does an agency do it, or is that really
Yep.
what we're saying is that now we've got to internalize it?
No, not at all. Repeatability and doing something that feels human or uniquely yours, not in conflict at all. In fact, I think they're very harmonious. And I'll give you an example. A lot of my clients come to me and they're established experts. They've been creating sort of generalized expertise based content for years and years. Hey, I've done it and you can too. And here are my 6 steps for doing it. And they're seeing just how not passionate anybody is about their work anymore, if they ever were. And maybe they're also losing interest in it. And so people will come to me and say, I have a podcast, it's plateauing or not taking off. I want to do more public speaking, but I don't want to be a breakout. I want to be a keynote to the whole main stage, or I want more of those types of talks. Or, hey, I know I need to build my personal brand, but I want to do it in a way that feels like it's unique to me and not just look at like all these hustle bros out there. And it's like, yeah, I get it. So now my job is to tease out of them something about their perspective to apply to the big idea, or what I call the premise, driving their show or their keynote or their overall brand. Right now, I need to do that in a repeatable way because I'm a freelancer, I'm a contractor, I'm a hired gun to help them. So it is repeatable. And I move them through a series of prompts. And so my response to the agency question is, now your job is to extract their perspective and synthesize it and tighten it and give it language and prompt them and question them and push them, etc., until what you have are these raw ingredients that you now know how to turn into a killer dish, because that's why you're hired. You're hired for your vision and your ability to synthesize your taste. So I was talking to a woman this morning in a coaching call, and she had hired me because she's in the self-help space and she knows she wants to help people develop better habits. And some of these people are entrepreneurs, and some of these people are, maybe in their lives, they want to have a better diet or, adopt a mindfulness practice. They know that on the other side of a behavior change and a habit they need to develop or kill is a better life or a better job, but they can't seem to make that change. And what she laid out to me was this sort of messy explanation that sounded like James Clear's Atomic Habits, or pretty much anybody talking about using small steps to develop habits for the long haul. So she's now commodified. She's yet another, not the only. And so I just started leading her through a series of prompts. I was like, so, okay, first, we are going to speak from the heart, I said to her. I want the 2-drink minimum, Scott, not the on a stage positioning myself to sound smart, Scott. What's the problem you solve? Rant against it for a time. And so she gives me this whole mess of stuff, and I'm furiously writing things down. I said, okay, you know what I noticed? And I followed up with a few questions. I said, you know what I noticed after our little interview here, when you were being honest and kind of giving me what's in your diary, not what's on your homepage, is you use the word just and should whenever describing the enemy of your story. Yeah, all these people out there trying to help you with your habits, just buy this tool, just try this technique, or here's this thing you should do. It's like, if it was really that simple, shoulds would become dids, justs would become dids. You wouldn't need this. So what's missing here? And she's like, well, the reason people aren't adopting these things, the reason these things aren't working, is there's actually something that happens before you make a behavior change. It's the physiological safety that you're lacking. So it's fine for a very privileged white straight male who's very affluent to say, just do this, and that advice works for him and others like him. But if you have a different circumstance or a different set of beliefs or a different upbringing or a different set of privileges or less or fewer privileges, or if you have tried to do that stuff and it didn't work and now that's in your brain, there's all these reasons why you're kind of acting like our early ancestors who don't want to be on the fringes lest they get picked off by a saber tooth. Don't raise your hand. Don't stick your neck out. Don't wear the dress that you want to wear. Don't wear the blazer you want to wear. Why? Because you'll be ostracized. Your body isn't saying to you, you're going to die. You're not like physically unsafe, but physiologically, biologically, you're actually like, I got to play it safe all the time. So if you're coming at this behavior change, which is a new thing, without embracing that about our brains and our bodies and our biology, then any of the advice, it won't work for you, right? So what she identified just by vomiting words at me from a place of truth, she got to this thing that no one else is talking about that is going to become her whole platform. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, everybody else is talking about behavior change. Unlike other people, I talk about it through the lens of first, this needs to happen before the actions need to happen, right? I address the illness, everyone else is addressing symptoms. That's her perspective. That's not mine, but I have a checklist of questions I've gotten really good at asking as a service provider to tease out her perspective. Give me the raw lump of clay. I'll help you shape it because I know language, but you know your perspective, you know your life. I want access to that. Give me it. So that's how you do it. It's very repeatable. If you're a service provider, that's your job, is you want to get not your perspective into the work, but theirs.
Beautiful. And I just realized that my snow clearing decided to show up not at 6 a.m. when they were scheduled to, but they do it right now. So I don't know if you can hear it or not, but that was a great explanation. I love that. And so as an agency, it's like that's a different form of work than what maybe a lot of them are used to. Is there a when you're meeting with the client, do you have like a strategy for creating, like, call them So that you're teasing out sort of a central concept.
Mhm.
But what about stories and stuff? Like stories are unique to me. Do you actually create like with my clients? I call them story wells. Like, can you give me like some story wells, like some examples of that? And we kind of work around with that. Is that do you kind of with somebody that's trying to really promote and create resonance with their audience? How do you actually do when you're the one that actually is experiencing the story? How do you walk someone through that and to be able to communicate that as a
What's a
provider?
story well? Can you define that for me?
So a story well for me would be like I have 5 different stories that talk about and being ambitiously lazy. Examples from when I was 5 to then when I was 40. So I'll kind of craft some stories. I do that for myself, or I'll get my client to go, okay, give me 4 different stories that really reinforce this position that you've kind of created.
Yeah. I mean, I Unthinkable has been around my podcast since 2016, and we passed 200 episodes earlier in the year. I've built
Congratulations, that's
shows
huge.
for, yeah, it's been a crazy ride. I built shows for other brands too, and I was an aspiring sports journalist anyway before that. So I've spent a long time learning how to be a good interviewer. I mean, to me, that's the hat I wear when I talk to a client, right? So they're like, so I hear from this morning, this person saying all these things about helping people change their habits, and I get to the theory of it. I get to the kernel, the truth. And again, I think that's an important part is your perspective really only feels potent and like it matters to you or others when you're just more honest with yourself. And so part of me pressing on my clients is to annoy them a little bit, is to get to the place where they're like, and then they start to swear, because this friggin' thing is so
Right.
GD terrible. Like that good. Yes, give me that, because we're going to build something publicly accessible up from there. But I got to get to the first principle of you and your perspective. And that's when you're honest with yourself, when you're not trying to posture to others. But once we get there, yeah, you need signature stories, right? And so there's all these kinds of signature stories you can fill in. I think everybody needs, that you have that lead brand story end to end. You have your story. Like if you notice, I didn't say I started my career here, then went here, then went here. Your story is not about you. It's about the message you're here to deliver. It's about the audience. So you can tell your story like a grocery list of things that you went shopping for in your career, which is boring as sin, by the way, and it serves nobody but you. Or you can still build credibility by crafting a personal story, your bio, your backstory, to make it about the thing you're here to say, right? So you need that story. And there's all these other stories, like as a keynote speaker and an author, that you kind of train yourself to spot. But at the end of the day, when I'm doing that as a service provider and a coach and a consultant for individual thinkers and executives and entrepreneurs, I'm just interviewing them like I would on my show. So, like, all right, Carrie, that was amazing. Thank you. I really understand the truth here. Can you give me an example? Right. And they don't really give me an example that great. And then I put them in a box and I'm like, okay, so just so I understand it, when you started your business, you thought Instagram was going to be really powerful for you. You had no budget, no funding yet, no team. So you open an Instagram account, you set up the profile, you started posting these talking head videos, you said. And then what happened next? I'm literally like putting the walls of a box around the person that I'm working with, and I'm opening one side and I'm like, go out that way. And I get them to tell the story. And then afterwards, we're like, that was one hell of a story with a little massaging and a little shaving here and an adding here. That's going to be killer for you. And then I want you to think about one phrase I tell all my clients when you give that story publicly, writing it, speaking it, whatever. That's the thing about, right? So you tell the story and you arrive at a crucial moment that makes you an effective storyteller, not just a good storyteller that commands attention, but an effective storyteller who inspires reflection and action in other people. That's the thing about this topic that you want to learn about, this insight that I have to give you today. So you might say, that's the thing about trying new things. What we fear isn't actually the task, it's the unknown. And if that's the case, which, oh, by the way, the science also shows us, then we shouldn't agonize over doing all this research, all the stuff I said before. If what we're afraid of is the unknown, move faster to make the unknown known. Try the thing once. So you shift from actually like talking about literally anything in your life, metaphorically or literally, to that's the thing about the topic I'm teaching you, the lesson or insight I'm gifting you. And so that's how I would establish one signature story for a client. I am in extraction mode. I do not create something or fabricate something for the client.
I mean, you're just a master at the storytelling stuff. Like, do you? So that's what you would do with a client. Now, do you teach, like in your creator kitchen? Do you teach people to craft story to
Yeah,
replicate how you
totally.
do? Because I think
Yep.
that's that's its own mastery. Like, I mean, that's
Yep.
something I feel like I can kind of tell good stories, but I don't think the level that you are. I'm a good trainer.
Yeah.
I feel like I know my topic, but telling the
Sure.
storytelling, I feel like that's like its own practice. Do you have like a methodology or a process, any outline you can share with us to kind of get us started, and why would be really something that would be really valuable?
Yeah, that's the thing about hangs off of a very small template that I like to use. So Creator Kitchen as a mastermind serves people who have been publishing content for a while, but they'd like to be stronger storytellers.
Hmm.
And so we focus on what we call personal transferable creative skills, not how to launch a podcast or how to grow a podcast, not how to capitalize on a new trend in tech, but what goes with you everywhere you go. Like the reason I'm good on a microphone for a guest interview has to do with other things I've done elsewhere, right? Like the skill set isn't I'm good at being a guest or I'm good at podcasting. The skill set is I'm good at distilling insights from a story, or I'm good at constructing a story, or even more so, especially what we do in the Creator Kitchen, is how do you pull from your personal lived experience to develop a really big idea, a premise that sits on a whole project, like the podcast premise, or your whole platform, your brand's premise. And then how do you find these micro moments in your day that turn into stories? They're little life moments. How do you do that? And so one um, bit of scaffolding you can put up when you're trying to build that is this 3-part story structure that we love to use inside the kitchen and teach our members. It goes like this: this happened, which made me realize that's the thing about. This happened is just a memory or a moment you experienced. So in the espresso example, hey, this happened. I have an espresso machine. I was afraid, my wife, my agony. I didn't do it. Now I do it every day. And what changed? Not a story, just a description of something that happened. And you learn, of course, how to make it more vivid the more you do these things. But ultimately, it's flat. This happened. Then some realization, some idea popped to mind as a result of you experiencing that. And that made me realize, oh wait, I actually shouldn't have done all that research. I actually shouldn't have asked my wife. This is far easier than I was thinking. Why? What's going on here? Why did I agonize over this thing? So this happened, which made me realize. And that's the thing about the topic I'm teaching you, the insight I'm gifting you, right? And so you do that over and over again. And like building any structure, eventually the scaffolding comes off and you can create in a way that's only, makes sense to you, but feels right to you and also works for the audience. But at least having that initial sort of scaffolding or structure allows you to hit the right beats to arrive at an insight that feels universal. And that's really the rub here. A lot of people think I can't turn to my personal life because I keep chickens in my yard. And although I want to use that as a metaphor for teaching marketing, what if they don't care about keeping chickens in my yard? This is an actual example from one of our members, Brittany. Now, of
Okay.
course, here's the punch. They might not care about chickens, Brittany, but that doesn't mean you need to retreat from the personal and go to the general. In general, marketers today, no, don't do that. Stick with the chickens, stick with the story, but go further inward because there you move past the topic of your own story and the action of your own story, and you get to the emotional stakes, right? Like me talking about coffee, you might not care about making espresso, but you've probably agonized over something. And so when I say this happened, I have to make clear what the emotions were like too. I'm not just describing what happened, I'm describing the emotions and how I felt while it was happening. So Brittany can do that talking about keeping chickens, or Amanda can do that because she just had her second child and is grappling with that. Or I can do that talking about my love of the New York Knicks or New Haven pizza. And you might not care about any of those on surface, but you also might not be able to relate to a superhero who has spider powers, or a soccer coach who used to be a football coach here in the States and moves to the UK, or a horrifying villain, or a wonderful romance story. Like these things on face might not actually be relevant to you, but all of our favorite storytellers and all of our most effective stories we have in the zeitgeist, they go beyond the topics and the action to connect with audiences around the emotional stakes. So really it's a paradox. You can tell a story about your personal life and anything about it. Fun stuff, serious stuff, hobbies, weird things, doesn't matter. But you have to go all the way internally. And the paradox is to connect deeper externally, go deeper internally, because you got to get to the emotional stakes of the story.
And is this how close is this to the hero's journey? Because emotional, there's like a little bit of like the whole hero's journey. It seems like that one's more of like a bigger story, you've been able to get I think you've kind of got the hero's journey version down to like micro minutes that you can make with anything. If I
Well,
could,
that's really like my bent. It's
yeah.
my bent and my frustration. I love learning from non-business people, non-marketers. If anything, I'm a little bit scared that like if people around me stopped learning from other marketers and started learning from artists and entertainers and journalists and all these others,
Hmm.
that people would devalue my ideas because they'd be like, "No kidding, man." Like, but that my perspective comes from really disdaining most of marketing and not learning from my peers, however many great awesome peers I do have, and looking elsewhere. So, but the problem, the frustration is it doesn't translate that well. Like I could create a hero's journey type story, but also tomorrow I have to write a blog post, which sounds like how to run Instagram ads, you know? So like, where's the hero's journey in that? And I'm going, okay, well, instead of convincing your boss to start writing sweeping narratives every time you show up, what can you do to imbue that seemingly commodified idea and post with a perspective that can only come from you? In other words, it's personal,
Hmm.
and that makes it more original. What can you do without getting any more time or resources to take that piece and make it more valuable? Because it's not just instructional, it's insightful. Like these are not a resource problem or related to resources, they're related to how you use your resources. So, how do you do that? Okay, open the piece going, this happened, which made me realize that's the thing about in a paragraph, even. And now we're off to the races to teach some kind of instructional type content, which maybe seems like it could have come from anybody, but the way the audience will view that, and also naturally, the way you will change and manipulate that is informed by that one initial opening story, right? So to me, it's got to show up in the actual work tomorrow, right? In the process and practice, the crafting of your work is where this stuff has to happen. So I adore all the stuff you're talking about. Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, Dan Harmon, Story Circle. You know, like I just saw a post online from a friend of mine writing about Kurt Vonnegut's story shapes and all these things. Wonderful, wonderful things. Um, but you also have work to do tomorrow, right? So how does it show up there immediately without you needing permission or resources? That's really my focus.
I love it. Well, in this today's environment, little bite-sized pieces and breaking it up and finding insights and recording. So it's so cinematically big to do the hero's journey to like you said, like a simple post. So that's a stand. I love I've loved that framework. The other framework that I loved, and I again I'm going to refer to the stuff that I follow you on is you gave a really good example, a grid of commoditized content.
Yeah,
And I feel like that sort of like segues into AI, and then I want to finish a little bit on personal branding because I know
sure,
we have
sure, sure.
timing. So, could you describe this framework? And I'll end
Mm-hmm.
up putting it in the show notes, links to it. But it's brilliant because it really helps people understand how commoditized content's becoming, and actually, frankly, I think how simple it could be to get outside of this zombie content that we're creating
Right,
in the world.
right. Well, ultimately, what I did without knowing it, thank you for leading me here, is I didn't give you the framework. I did give you the movement throughout the framework, which is from commodified content to content that resonates. And, you know, the commodified way of explaining to somebody you should try new things was that like very generic, oh, studies say in general, blah, blah, blah. That's commodified. And something that feels like it can resonate more emotionally might sound like a quick personal story or some kind of personal perspective imbued into the work. So I gave you the motion on this framework. Now let me give you the framework. So I want you to picture two axes, the vertical and the horizontal, because there are two traits, two features of your work which determine how high impact or not it is. So we want to create things that are higher impact. We want to get off the content hamster wheel, stop creating thing that wastes resources and is forgettable and ineffectual for our brands and doesn't affect our audiences at all either. How do we do that? Think about being higher impact as being directly proportional to two traits of your content: its value to other people and its originality to you, right? So the vertical axis is its value. All the way at the bottom, you have informational content. It's pretty low value. Like what is AI, or the bio and backstory of Anthony Bourdain, my favorite storyteller, or the 6 fastest growing brands today reported using some data. Informational content. It's the lowest value content. I'm not saying it's no value, low value. A little bit higher up is instructional. Now, the difference between informational and instructional is you give directions, right? So, informational is like, here's a map, it's of North America, you have it now. But instructional is like, you want to go to the X, we're at the current starting point. We're at this dot. I'll draw a red line to the X. But the problem is, as you hand them that instruction, you created a direction follower. So when they encounter a variable you didn't anticipate, like a tree falls on their path, they don't know what to do. But way more valuable than that is something that's insightful. So the opposite of informational is insightful. That's like handing them a compass. They can navigate. They know their true north. They can go anywhere with it, even if they find an obstacle you couldn't anticipate. And so informational, the 6 fastest growing brands. Insightful, why are they growing so fast? Informational, what is AI? Insightful, why we should be thinking about using AI in small business, service provider businesses today. Informational, the backstory of Bourdain. Insightful, what made him such a powerful storyteller, right? And so if AI is trained on the content of the internet, then you are going to be trained on the content of your own life. And you can use that perspective to figure out, what's this insight from my perspective? No one's going to say, and this is the objective right insight to pull out from whatever you're teaching. There is a moment of stepping out over the wire to trust yourself. Because if informational content merely updates people, insightful content empowers them. That's what we're going for. So that's the value spectrum. Really quickly, the other spectrum is originality. And on one extreme, you have general, 6 tips to build a better podcast. And on the other, where we want to be, is personal. From your personal perspective, I want to dissect 3 amazing podcasts and teach you what I see about them, arriving at my steps for building a better podcast, right? Or you have a brand mission or a personal mission that informs the work. So can you create something that is at once insightful and personal from your personal perspective? And it doesn't just give them a set of instructions, but actually a profound insight that changes them. And if you are stuck in the low value, unoriginal territory, in other words, low on the vertical axis and all the way at the beginning of the horizontal, you're in this little box that I call the commodity cage. And we're on our hamster wheels and we're trying so hard to produce content, but not much of it works. And then we try to speed up and we think we're going somewhere, but we're on a hamster wheel, so we're going nowhere. And then we try to get clever and we're going to take the one thing that isn't all that powerful to begin with, and we're going to repurpose it into 17 smaller bits, because everyone's obsessed with content repurposing, when the first thing itself wasn't worth repurposing, right? It's like, what are we doing? We have not learned how to do anything but share things that are informational and instructional and very generic, right? So we have to escape the commodity cage and produce things that resonate deeper. And I would look towards those 2 dimensions to do that. Can you be more valuable, aka more insightful? And can you be more original, aka more personal?
Beautiful framework. I loved it right when I saw it. I was like, oh man, you totally nailed it. I understood it very right away, and it just made total sense. I just love how you were able to distill these things down. Now for somebody that's listening and they're going, okay, this all is awesome, but man, I've got AI and I got my fingertips. Isn't AI going to create all this new, brilliant new content that I can then be original with, and all these things, and I could create art and stuff, and I know I share the same views. I'm curious what you would like to say to that.
Yeah, if you know how to imbue what you do with things that can only come from you, then AI is your intern. Have at it, my friend. It's going to unblock your imagination. A lot of people are using it to outsource their imagination. In other words, they're doing work that doesn't uniquely require them to begin with, which means pretty soon they will no longer be required. So that's why this message I have has become urgent after years of it just being, I hope, important to some people, but dismissible to some too. Because very quickly you're going to see we can create mediocrity at breathtaking scale. Like, we can create more and more and more commodity content. So these tools, and I wish we weren't saying generative AI. I wish we were saying assistive AI, because that's really what it's for. I have a chat thread in ChatGPT to help me name projects, but I'm not picking the names it gives me. I'm helping unblock pieces like, hey, here's a name I really admire. Give me 10 variations on that. I'm going to work and rework it, right? That's unblocking a piece of the process. But like I said at the top of the show, if you prompted me to teach other people how to try new things, and you prompted a tool to teach other people how to try new things, they're going to give you the generic. I'm going to give you something that feels insightful and personal. In other words, valuable and original. So are we all. There's a lot of hidden craft, but the most important part of mastering your craft isn't a process. It's not the workflow. It's not the techniques. It's the fact that you practice, you ship the work every week, whether or not you feel like it, intending to be good. Sure. Feeling good in the moment, maybe not, right? So you have a practice and you have a posture. Storytellers have a posture. They see themselves and the world a certain way. I think there's this amazing quote from Ira Glass that sums this up nicely, which is, great stories happen to those who can tell them. What he's not saying is that the only things worth sharing seem to happen to the people who already know how to share them. What he's saying is storytelling is a creative act. You're not just transcribing a moment from your life and putting it out in the world. You work it and rework it and shape it and mold it from your personal perspective to arrive at a unique insight. And it has some power to it because you have put it there. So can you imbue these ordinary things with insights and feelings that feel extraordinary? That is the role of the human in an era full of AI mediocrity.
Beautiful. And so the last point I want to jump on is just the shift. So I know that you're deeply involved with creators. This is sort of the creator economy has been this real shift that's coming on. I know you were at an event recently with some friends of mine and talking about the creator economy. Can you talk a little bit about the creator economy and maybe I believe anyways, my point of view is that the surge of personal brand has never been more valuable, more important than ever. And I'm curious, like, what your perspective is on this.
One of the almost like undeniable trends that I've picked up on since joining content marketing as an industry in 2011 is that the media is always a few steps ahead of marketers who create content, and then marketers catch up, and then media goes further, and then marketers catch up, and then and right now the big missing piece in how marketers earn trust compared to how media earns trust is talent. Now, I don't mean talent as in you are talented. I mean talent as a job function. I mean the people who have the creative skills to show up anywhere, video, audio, written, in person, virtual, doesn't matter, and share their ideas in a way that helps earn trust and inspire action. And the way you inform your relationship with a media company is through the talent. You read the columnist, you listen to the host, you watch the speaker, you read the author, you're engaging with humans. And then you wake up one day and you go, wow, that's my favorite media company, right? Like before they got acquired from Spotify, for me, that was theringer.com. A lot of alumni from ESPN's prestige magazine Grantland went to The Ringer, and I fell in love with different voices that emerged from their organization and woke up one day going, The Ringer's my favorite, right? Now I trust them more. Now I'll give them the benefit of the doubt more. Now if I need a podcast recapping Loki's season 2 finale, I'm going to go find it on The Ringer's podcast network. Why? Because they're my favorite. That's where we want to get to. Not the best, not the most followed. There's no objective ranking here. You're not Steph Curry and we're talking about the number of threes you've hit. That's not our careers. We're talking about, can you connect so deeply and emotionally with people? Can you resonate that they put you among the choice few things that feel irreplaceable to them? They pick you and stick with you against the odds. That's about you connecting with a person, not a logo. And so we like to say this in marketing. People trust people, not logos. People buy from people, not logos. But we haven't played it out far enough. If that's what we truly believe, then we need to have teams that look like talent, right? You have the actual individual, the creators coming in-house, either staffed full-time or contracted part-time among marketing teams, or cultivating that internally. And for those saying, what if they leave? Create a wall of fame. If it's news that a creator left your organization, what great work did they do for you? Amazing. The core competency isn't Jay works for your brand. The core competency is we know how to create Jays. We're a place for talent and cultivating talent. So what I like to say here is content marketing teams are in trouble because they're so focused on creating content. What they need to get good at doing is creating creators.
Love it. We'll just end it on that. That's like perfect little ending note that you nailed it on. If you want to just send people to where they can find you, where'd like to send you?
If you're listening in a podcast player, my show is Unthinkable. We talk about all these unconventional choices that creative people made as a result of trusting themselves more than best practices. And maybe we should think like them. And then if you're interested in reading instead, I write an every other week newsletter to help you become a stronger storyteller. And that's at jayacunzo.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show. And everyone listening, thank you for joining me again. If you want to go to groundswell.fm, drop me a voicemail. Let me know what you think. Give me some feedback. If you want to hear about some new stories, you want to connect with Jay, or you want to post something, please write a review and give me some feedback. Love to hear from you. Until next time, mahalo.